The military rebellion and the defeat of Emperor Philip the Arab in the battle near Verona demonstrated once again with all clarity that the army was now the only significant political force in the empire. Neither the Senate, forced to first condemn the next usurper to recognize him, nor the Praetorian Guard, much more interested in the long life of the emperor, as it was the only thing that ensured their stable position, no longer had any influence on the choice of the new ruler. In the best case, a senator or a Praetorian prefect was in the right place at the right time and led the rebellious mass of soldiers. For this, however, needed a small thing, military experience and some authority in the troops. But the desire to overthrow the current government could not have, and at least Decius Trajan remained loyal to Philip Arab even in the darkest hour for him and led a revolt of troops, as he himself stated, not of his own free will, but for the sake of stopping senseless and ruthless violence. Decius himself, having become emperor, found himself in exactly the same position as his predecessor. Another usurpation caused a swarm of new usurpations of smaller caliber throughout the empire. Barbarians again began to press on the borders. The economy began to crack at the seams. The emperor needs to be everywhere at once in order to buy threats and show his warlords that everything is under control. And he needs to be in Rome at the same time to try to still manage the state and save the economy. Decius swings between fronts, directs the most loyal commanders somewhere, but he has to go to the key directions of the barbarian strikes himself. It is obvious that the empire will not last long in such a mode. And then in his head is born an ingenious at first glance idea, to find an assistant. Since the basis of the emperor's power is the army, it is logical to allocate the entire civilian sector to a single person. You can even a senator, but loyal. In his hands will be the logistics, but without the opportunity to earn a reputation in the army. An ideal scheme, especially since it was sold to the Senate as a return to republicanism, and Decius even found such a loyal man, Publius Licinius Valerius, one of the most noble senators that could be found in those dark times. Although he represented one of the collateral branches of the family Licinius, but at that time in such kinship was already enough. One trouble. From such an offer, and he and the other candidates refused because they well understood that their position will depend entirely on Decius and his popularity in the troops. The failure of the attempted reform did not embarrass the emperor, but fate did not give him a second chance. He died during the reflection of the onslaught of the Goths on the Balkan border. He died shamefully, drowned in a swamp, fleeing after the defeat. Decius governed only a year and a half. The new emperor has been proclaimed by armies on Balkans the commander of the Second Roman Army, which has gone on help Decius. Tribonian Gaul, in general it Etruscan, and Gaul it is his cognomen, personal nickname of one of the ancestors which became patrimonial. Since the situation on the border after the defeat was monstrous, Tribonian decided to negotiate peace and bought off the Goths with a huge contribution. In Rome, the new emperor brought the son of Decius, Hostilianus, closer to himself, giving him the title of Augustus, his own son, Volusianus, in the rank of Caesar made a co-emperor. Thus Tribonian tried to show that he continues the work of the deceased emperor. This did not save him from another batch of rebellions, for which, moreover, there were grounds. Immediately after Tribonian's accession, rumors spread that he had lured Decius into a trap and paid the Goths because he was in league with them. Everything was aggravated when, because of another outbreak of plague, which began to devastate the empire, died Hostilian, but the rumor was that he was killed by the emperor. To somehow improve the opinion of citizens, the emperor took upon himself to bury the destitute Romans. Reputation it has not saved, as simultaneously the situation on borders has sharply worsened. On Balkans, Goths have decided that they have paid too little and have come again to knock Romans. In the east, Persians have begun the next campaign on Rome, and the Romans did not like bad news from the fronts. The soldiers on the Balkan front, dissatisfied with the general situation in the country, and the fact that the emperor and his son were in Italy while the Goths were ravaging the Balkans after defeating the Goth bands, proclaimed their own commander, Aemilianus, as emperor. An attempt to feverishly organize the defense of Italy led to the fact that the soldiers, tired of the 2-year and extremely unsuccessful rule, slaughtered Tribonian and his son and recognized Aemilian as emperor. But Aemilian's reign lasted barely a month. Valerius, summoned earlier by Trebonianus to help with Rhenish legions, arrived in Italy and won in a non-contact fight. Soldiers of Aemilianus, as earlier Trebonianus, also did not want to die and slaughtered already Aemilianus. Valerius was coming to the throne of the state, which was actively rolling into the abyss. Rome and Italy, after the plague in general, represented a pitiful sight. Economy in ruins, the enemies are piling on all borders. After the withdrawal of troops from the Rhine border, it immediately took advantage of the Franks, making a deep raid into Gaul. Valerian again had to solve the problem, how to be in several places at once. The decision, similar to the one made by Trebonianus, he appointed his son Gallienus as co-emperor with the title of Augustus, and his grandson Valerian, and after his death his second grandson, Saturninus, made Caesar. In this triumvirate all power is in Valerian alone, but Gallienus and his son have a considerable degree of freedom and are given separate fronts to contain threats. Appointing their own heirs to such responsible positions allowed them to reduce the risk of military mutiny, as they would have the highest authority in the army while knowing that the power in the empire would sooner or later be theirs. But all this is in theory. In practice it will turn out a little differently. While Gallienus defended the Rhine frontier, Valerian first restored the constitutional order in the east, shaken by usurpation. After that he went to the Balkans, where Gothic bands were again troubling. But at this time another army of Goths invaded Asia Minor and devastated a large part of the province. At the same time, from the other side of the Roman territories were being bitten by the Persians. Having eliminated a threat to the Balkans, Valerian began to prepare for a campaign to the east. For such a large-scale operation needed money, and there was no money. Then Valerian unfolds a campaign against Christians, a separate point of which was confiscation of property of senators and horsemen, professing this destructive for the empire cult. This was the third attempt to persecute Christians. The first, at Decius, ended with the death of the emperor in the swamp, the second at Tribonian, the murder of the emperor by his troops, and the third, the most severe of all, will end in phenomenal disgrace. With 70,000th army, Valerian rolled steamroller on the barbarians, devastating Asia Minor, then opposes the Persians, and in the battle between Edessa and Charis suffers a crushing defeat, losing the entire army. Valerian himself is the first emperor to be captured by the barbarians, and the Persian Shah Shapur turns him into a slave used as a footstool. According to one version, when the slave emperor got fed up with the Shah, he was poured molten gold down his throat following the example of Crassus. In another version, he died from mistreatment. In any case, it was an incredible disgrace. The empire had neither the strength to repel its ruler nor the money to ransom him. Gallienus would make a bad face at a bad game by claiming that ransoming one man, even an emperor, was not worth the empire's money. The decision is understandable, but extremely shameful for Rome. In this case, he will remain the only legitimate ruler of the empire, which literally before our eyes is falling apart. The eastern provinces, without any help from Rome, break away, only formally recognizing Gallienus as emperor. In Gaul flares up a rebellion postum, which ends with the separation of Gaul and Spain, while dying Salonin. Rebellion raises the Danubian army, as well as Macedonian Egypt broke away. In the end, in the hands of Gallienus remained Italy, Transpadana, Illyricum, and Africa. It was as if there had been no Roman conquests for the last 400 years. The empire was already standing almost on the edge of the abyss, putting one foot in the door and preparing to take the second step. It seemed that it could not be saved from total collapse.